Tzohoraim Tovim, good afternoon, everybody. Officially good afternoon now, because it's a couple minutes past 12. Welcome back to the Beit Midrash. I hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody had a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving. I hope you were able to take some time with friends, with family, or whomever you spent it with, and found some time to be grateful for the blessings and gifts we have in our life. Because we didn't meet last week, because of Thanksgiving, we got two parshiot we're going to try to cover today. So I don't want to talk too long. I kind of want to jump in. We'll start last week, and then about halfway, we'll try to switch to the next one. So let's go back in time. Feel like I want to do like the Wayne's World, like like or like rewind ourselves back to last week and Parshat Vayetze and Rabbi Sacks' commentary. I'll open it up to you guys. Any thoughts, comments, reactions before we dive in?
Only the reaction that this is really fortuitous to have these two particular parshiot, the ones that we have to cover today, since even Rabbi Sacks sort of confounds them in his discussion of the first one. So
yeah, I did feel like there was a lot of similarity between the two. Was I the only one who felt that too?
Well, Rabbi, maybe you can kind of answer this while everybody's thinking. I forget which one of the two this was in, but there are some unbelievable stories that are in these Parshiyot, and some of the foundational stories of the Torah. But then there are times, so you read these things, if you read the Torah, not just the commentary, but then things will break off and they will start describing the children of Esau. And there's a whole page, without, I don't think there was a philosophical message that the Torah was trying to give us, but you have this list of people and maybe where they lived and whatever. So I was going to ask you, Rabbi, why is that in the Torah? What is the Torah trying to tell us? And did you have to take a test in rabbinical school about Esau's children?
No, I did not have to take a test about Esau's children. I did have to take a test on what were some of the main things that happened in each parsha. So there's like a list of parshiot, and you have to give like 2 or 3 things that happen in each one. But the short answer to the question is the rabbis are quick to say that there is no accident, every word, every letter in the Torah has significant meaning. So why is the story of Esau there? That's for us to interpret and to understand and to figure out. As if I remember correctly, there's a line in that parsha with Esau where it says, maybe it was a different, I'm trying to remember which genealogy it was in, but there's one where it says that he ruled as king before there was a king in Israel. He ruled as king in Edom before there was a king in Israel. And so the Zohar has a great time with that verse and creates like whole other worlds that existed, that there were whole worlds and universes that existed before our current one. And so, yes, there's a lot that you can do with it. Rabbi David Kasher of the Hadar Institute had Devar Torah on that also, and how there's kind of a parallel with the way this week's Parsha begins and the way it ends, and that there's some parallelism that kind of ties in with how we should understand the Parsha as a whole. So yes, there's plenty of commentary. I don't want to spoil all of it, because then what are you going to do research on? If you'd like me to forward you that, Rabbi Kasher, though, remind me. Anybody who's interested, send me an email after class. I can forward it to you.
Well, my answer to that would be in the second reading toward the end on Vayishlach, where it says all of his children stayed within the faith. That was Jacob's accomplishment. And to me, that meant like the collective, more than just his direct children, but also the descendants of that group of people. So that's why he named them all, just to say all these people.
Yeah, except I think Stuart was asking about Esau's children. And I think some of the recognition there is that in Esau's children is still our family.
Yeah.
We might not trace our line through them, but they're still our cousins, our relatives, and that they are still important because of that.
Well, did they remain Jews, Esau's family?
No, they never were.
Okay. Well, that
Um,
explains that. Okay.
So they were Edomites, yes.
Okay. Well,
They
And
were Edomites that, and eventually in rabbinic literature, Edom becomes synonymous with the church and with Christianity,
okay.
not usually in a positive way. So coming back to Vayetze, and we'll work our way back to Vayishlach. Anything stand out? Any reactions you guys had? Anything that? What were your thoughts on the chapter of Vayetze and out of the depths, and the deepest crises of your life can turn out to be the moments when you encounter the deepest truths and acquire your greatest strengths?
I wanted to maybe go simpler than that and ask, show my ignorance of Hebrew and the fact that I don't know where there's a Hebrew dictionary around here other than online, but
My shelves.
well, I meant around this location. But yeah, for me, when I need to know something in Hebrew, I have to call Morris Stein or somebody like that, who Dahlia. So it's by Yishla. What's the next one? It's by something else.
Vayesha.
By Yesha. And it's struggle after struggle after struggle, or this one, crises after struggle after, Vayesha, same thing, tough times, tough decisions, etc. Does by mean something? Or is it just like a conjunction starting a word?
Good. So quick Hebrew grammar lesson for everybody. Actually, I'll give you a quick biblical Hebrew grammar lesson. I'll try to do it as quickly as I can. My goal is in 2 minutes. There's different ways you conjugate verbs. In biblical Hebrew, it is typically conjugated in the imperfect for you grammar nerds out there, which means that it's a in process or an uncompleted action. In modern Hebrew, it's actually used as the future tense generally. But in biblical Hebrew, it's more considered imperfect because it can mean both present and future. However, biblical Hebrew, modern Hebrew doesn't do this, but biblical Hebrew has this what's called the vav reversive, in which you put a vav at the beginning of a verb and it'll flip it from the imperfect to the perfect. And by the way, it works the other way. So if you put a vav at the beginning of a perfect verb, it actually turns it into a future tense. Nobody's entirely sure why. Nobody's entirely sure what created it. It's just, or why it exists. It exists in biblical Hebrew, but kind of ceased to exist in post-biblical Hebrew. And even later biblical Hebrew, some of the later books in the Bible don't use it very frequently. So the yud at the beginning usually indicates third person masculine. Can also, depends on the suffix, can also be third person plural. So the vav kind of acts as, so vayetze would like, yetze would be like he goes out, vayetze is he went out. Yishlach would mean he sent or he will send. Vayishlach is he sent. Vayeshev, which is the next parsha, is he sat or he dwelt, or he will sit, he will dwell. Vayeshev is he sat, he dwelled, and then it goes on. Parshiot are typically named after the first significant word in the Torah. So if the first word is Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, which is the most commonly appearing verse in the Bible, it'll skip all of that and go to like the first thing after that. So that's how the parshiot are named, after the first word that would clearly identify that parsha. I did pretty well doing that in about 2 minutes. So
That was good.
So the crises, the struggle, that's all in the interpretation.
Correct. I mean, there is something to Vayetze. He went out from Lavan's house, or he went out from this location. It does imply something,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily have to do. Like, we also went out from Egypt, so, and it's Yetze, Vayetze, or Vayetzu also. But no, it doesn't necessarily, the parsha title does not necessarily imply the themes that he's interpreting out of it. Did you guys like this interpretation? Let's start with that. Did it resonate with you? Stuart's kind of nodding. Everyone else seems a little ambivalent.
I got goosebumps when I read this one.
Why?
Why? Because it's well, I think it applied to me, but I think it's something that separates Jewish people from Gentile people, just the way that we think about God and God being with us and working through our problems together. We've talked in this group, we've talked about that concept in general, but I think that would be my best explanation.
Anybody not like it?
Stuart, I wish you'd say more about that.
I'll have to think about that. I'll write it to you at the end of the class, I think.
Okay.
Good to us all.
Of course.
I have a question about maybe my own understanding. This is let me ask my rabbi this, about spirituality, about faith, about our own concept or concepts of that, or maybe it's even more, because we're talking about crises in your life getting you to something deep, or a struggle getting you to maybe a real truth. So when I read something like this, I wonder why life has to be so hard to get where maybe we want to be.
Yeah.
I think did I ever get anything out of the tough times in my life? And what did I miss? I didn't mean to.
Does anybody want to chime in? I have my answer, but I wanted to see if anybody else wanted to chime in before I do.
Come on, Cindy, you always get me straight.
All right, Barbara. I think it's in the struggle that we are more present, and we are able, and rather than just, so much of our lives we're just running through life, getting from thing to thing, and the struggle, even though it seems like a negative, it's an opportunity for a positive. So the struggle increases our focus so that we can see more clearly and dissect the problem, move forward in a positive way. And I think that it opens us up to possibilities. So maybe, and I'm not sure, it opens us up to the idea of faith. That, I guess, I think that's the message of the Torah, that that through the struggle, is the opportunity for faith. And, I want to believe that. I'm not sure that I do. But I do see that, I think our lesson from Jacob is that, that he's just like all of us, that, we're not patriarchs like Abraham and that we're not, none of us are extraordinary human beings like Abraham and Moses, but that we, most of us are the Jacobs of the world, that we have struggles, that we have hard times, that's just life, especially in a world where God does not control everything. So, if we can be present and pay attention to the struggles, maybe we can move forward in that positive direction and maybe have more faith that if not God, if somebody who's bringing God into the world can help us through that time and maybe help us have the strength we need to move forward.
Very Hasidic of you.
I mean, you asked. I was trying to keep my mouth shut.
No,
No, it was beautiful. It was lovely, but
I think what you said made a lot of sense and pointed out something specific to me, and that is that I shouldn't, or it doesn't matter that I'm not Abraham, Moses, David, whatever, chosen by God, that I have to choose to recognize that I can still do good things. But when am I going to get there? It might be generations later, and I mean, which is how it appears to be in Jacob's situation.
Well, it is the daily struggle. It is the daily struggles of life that define us. I know,
well, but they all didn't struggle. But he talks about Abraham and Isaac had a different approach. And for me personally, I guess I'm not a good multitasker. When I'm upset or involved with something, I've focused on that and not necessarily feeling spiritual, whereas after it's over or on the quiet times in the middle, I have time to get in touch with the more spiritual and think about it and maybe it affects the fight, but I think I'm very present in the fight, but not spiritually.
yes, Margaret.
I want to bring this back to something a whole lot more mundane. And this reminds me of my doctoral thesis. It was work with animals. And what I wondered was if having difficult experiences at one time that you were able to overcome made it possible to react with less stress to experiences in the future. Now, this was a bunch of mice we're talking about. But
what was the answer?
But the answer was that, in fact, the hypothesis that difficult things at one time would make it more was affirmed by the supported. Let's say I'm more correct to say it was supported by the research. So I think there is something to this that doesn't necessarily have to speak. I mean, when you're a human being, you can add faith on, as another part of it. but I think there is something to the fact that struggle somehow, I mean, it's sort of a cliche in a way, you know, that struggle improves us, but you know, I think that that's actually the case, and as human beings, perhaps we can put that in not only in kind of more behavioral terms, but also in more psychological terms that also includes the possibility of faith.
Can you define faith?
Oh, Barbara. You're such a pot stirrer.
Can someone define faith in a way that fits me, my ideas, whatever? What's faith?
Well, when I think of faith, in any case, it means faith means believing something for which there is no proof.
Proof.
Description.
What's that?
No proof or no description. Nothing tangible, nothing.
I would almost define it as belief in something that you have no rational reason to believe in.
That's
It has no what?
No rational reason to believe in.
So excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Howard.
Okay. So it seems to me, going back to Morgan's study, I can understand that certain types of trauma that one overcomes, and I'm going to say these are less severe, minor traumas. My grades aren't good. I got finals coming up, and I find if I pull all-nighters and study hard enough, I pass this test. That may help me in the future as far as realizing I can do this, give me more confidence. But on the other hand, I don't see that works as well with major trauma, personal traumas, family losses, accidents that cause severe disabilities. That you get my drift on it. That I don't think that in general that precludes making one a stronger. I think on the other hand, I think it may question one's faith, and is going back to faith. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
well, what I was limiting. I mean, my thoughts were limited to a trauma or whatnot that one could overcome in some way, found some way to overcome. I mean, certainly there are traumas that occur that for one reason or another, because of the trauma or because of the situation or because of the person involved, they're things that are too severe to be overcome, and which do ruin or permanently affect lives.
Do you think that could just be learned behavior rather than getting stronger psychologically?
Well, since it's generalizable from one situation to another, I think it's probably not simply learned behavior.
Well, can I mention a trauma that was in this Parshi this week by Yishlach? It was not discussing this, but in this particular parsha, one of Jacob's daughters, her name was Dinah, got raped by the son of a very prominent, non-Jewish person in their community. And I don't know how you would respond to that, how you would recommend responding to that. But the first response was, well, I will let your son marry Dinah if you let us circumcise all the males. Which,
so, yeah. Yes, he doesn't discuss the story.
But let
What I
me
will say is, because I wrote my undergraduate thesis on that story, the story is a lot more complicated than it appears on the surface, including some debate, even in scholarly and rabbinic literature, about whether or not she was raped. And it parallels another story, which there is a very clear rape, but it works opposite. So, I actually think Anita Diamant wrote an entire book called The Red Tent, which focuses on this issue. And if I recall, she's pretty adamant that it wasn't rape. Some of the story is open to interpretation. It's just not entirely, there's a lot of weird things that happen in that story that's not entirely clear, which is why I just don't want to go down the rabbit hole of that story.
Well, I would just say two of who Simeon and Levi interpreted it as a very bad, whatever you want to call it, insult or rape or whatever, and they went into the town and they slew all the males of that.
Yes, that's part of that's part of the challenge of that story, is whether or not they were right, and whether or not the Torah implicitly approves of their action. Another complicating factor is where's Jacob throughout this story, who is silent until I think the second to last verse, more or less. When you read it very closely, it becomes a very complex story, which is one of the fascinating and beautiful things about the Torah, is that it's 30 verses, 34 verses. I'm trying to look quickly. I think it's 34 verses, and it's infinitely fascinating how many things you can pull from those 34 verses, whether it's not practically 31 verses, sorry. But how much you could actually pull and debate and argue those 31 verses. If anyone's bored and wants to read an 80 some odd page undergraduate thesis on it, let me know. I can see if I can dig it up. I thought it was on my shelf. It was on my shelf at one point, but I don't know where I put it now.
I'm glad you mentioned that rabbit hole, because that is that's an extremely troubling part of this.
Yes.
So
I want to come back to Barbara's question for a moment, since she did ask me, and I did want to hear what other people had to say, but I also want to make sure I don't avoid answering her question. As you've heard me talk about, I often think of faith, belief, religion in relational terms, as a relationship between us and God. And in relationships, there is something to it that challenges, struggles, issues that you have in the relationship, if you work through them together as a couple, whatever that coupling may be, romantic, friends, family, siblings, whatever, when you work through them, it can strengthen and reinforce the relationship so that it is stronger than it was before. So there is I do think there is something to what Rabbi Sacks says, in that in the struggle, you really find your deepest strengths and your deepest, you can grow in your faith through going through the struggle. Putting it in a different term, there's one of my favorite songs has a lyric. It says it's the things that scare me the most are was it? Are the things that scare me the most are the ones that I know I need. Right? Like it's the things that make us uncomfortable that help us grow the most. And I tell this to all the B'nai Mitzvah students, is that you're never going to grow when you're in a comfort zone and when you think everything's good and you're happy where you are. You need to push yourself a little beyond it, because that's the only way you're ever going to figure out what you can do and how you can grow. And, big and there, we don't always want to be living in a struggle. And I think that was my one, that was the thing that stood out to me about reading these two parshiot, is there's so much focus that Rabbi Sacks puts on struggling and going through difficult times. And yes, it happens to everybody, and faith can help with that, and faith should help with that, and and can help you grow and support you. And life shouldn't constantly be a struggle. There are happy times, there are good things that happen in life too, and those also reinforce and support our faith. And looking at it in relational terms again, the strength of your relationship is based on the day-to-day, based on the celebrations, on the good things that happen too, and how you grow together through the bad times. But if you don't have the foundation of the good times, if everything's constantly a struggle in a relationship, you're not going to want to stay in that relationship very long. So, how can we also grow through the good times is also an important way to think about this. Did that help at all, Barbara?
Well, God isn't doing his part or its part, doesn't call, doesn't email, doesn't a relationship, no matter who or what your relationship is with, isn't all one-sided.
And I would disconcur. I think God is talking and communicating. We just need to know how to listen.
Mm-hmm.
The book I'm currently reading is a Rabbi Harold Kushner wrote essentially a commentary on Psalm 23. And he kind of breaks it like phrase by phrase and gives like a little commentary on that phrase. And the first one is Adonai Roi, God is my shepherd. Well, what does it mean to be a shepherd? The shepherd is always there. The shepherd doesn't go anywhere. The shepherd's always with the flock.
As the protector, as the eyes and ears and looking out for issues.
Yes, and Rabbi Kushner is quick to point out also that just because the shepherd's always with the flock as a protector doesn't mean none of the sheep ever get hurt. Wolves still attack, and you can't protect every sheep all the time. But it's more of a God is constantly present. And I think that's where, the difficult times are where our faith is tested and where we struggle, because we want to know, why me? Why did this happen to me? And we want God to answer that for us. And sometimes the answer is, I'm here by your side regardless. I'm only about halfway through, but it's a good book if you ever want to read it. Maybe that's what we'll read next time. Who knows?
What's it called?
I think it's called something like The Lord is My Shepherd. I have to go back and look at it. It's at home, but I think it's something called like The Lord is My Shepherd, comforting, like the comfort of Psalm 23, something like that. I don't remember exactly.
So how do you know the Lord is by your side?
So that is the question of faith. is it's a belief that God is there, even though you have no rational, logical reason to think that God is there.
What makes you, maybe this is a personal question rather than a general question. I guess you could take it either way. But what makes you think or have faith that God is by your side?
So if you want to ask me personally, and other people, unless somebody else wants to chime in with the answer. Okay, I guess no one else wanted to chime in with the answer. Diana, you got to unmute. I can't hear you.
That's good. Y'all didn't listen to Howard ask me where the bread was. I mean, I
believe the bread is there, even though I don't have.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I feel God's presence. I feel lucky that I do feel God's presence all day long. I have other problems with this writing, but you know, I feel it when I look at where I live and how I live and how my family is and all the people who are trying to do good. It feels like their good is not as successful. It's not as successful as the folks who don't try to do good. But that doesn't eliminate, I guess, my hope and my faith that somehow we will get through this mess that we call life. Now, can I tell you the problem that I have with this writing?
Well, let me, I'll give
Okay,
my
all right, you answer
so
her.
then we can go on, but
Yeah.
Because I think fundamentally Judaism teaches that God loves us, God cares for us, and I look at somewhat similar to what Diane said, you know, I look at where I am in my life and feel like there's a lot of places where I could have gone differently. I could have gone down much worse paths, but God guided me down the path that I'm supposed to be on. And there are freak things that happened. And I think I mentioned this in a sermon a while back, you know, I wasn't supposed to go to a conference, but I found out that I could go to this conference, but not that year. I missed my chance. So I had to wait another year to go. And there was a young woman from the conference from another school who happened to go that same year to that conference, who was, you know, that was now 21 years ago, and we're married with 2 kids. You know, that's you can argue whether that's coincidence or not, but I also, you know, I feel like God had kind of guided us to go when we were supposed to go. Do we have some choice in the matter? Yes. It's not that, you know, I still could have chosen, you know what, I just don't want to do it anymore. I can't go this year, I'm not going at all. We have choice in the matter, but God still, what's Rabbi Artson's word? Lures us. There's a lure that God kind of pulls and tries to lure us to the right behavior, or to the behavior that God wants us to follow. So if I believe that God loves me and that God cares for me, then why wouldn't God be there even in the difficult times? Now, Diane, you were going to go on.
Right. So I apologize for joining late. I went to get some vaccine and the wait was longer than I anticipated. So I don't know if y'all covered this question in the first Parsha discussed about have you had times in your life where God was sending you a message, and what did you learn? How did you react? So that personal thing for me is something I really struggle with. I had one sister and one brother, and they each died at a time when I could not even sit Shiva because my husband was ill. And I took that really hard. That it happened to me once was terrible. But the second time it happened, I said, there must be some message here. How could that happen to me for each of my siblings? And the best I can come up with is that it was a message that you just can't, you have to keep going even in the worst of times. That's the only message I could get from it. But it still seems grossly unfair to me. But the real question that I have is, there's a sentence that when describing how we see Jacob, that he was portrayed that way because how could the children really understand unless we had, a really admirable character. And so I'm like, are we studying all this that was written for the children? Are we children in our understanding of it? That sentence really, really frustrated me.
Do you find that sentence? Because I'm not sure to which you are.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'll look for it.
Yeah. While she's looking, any other comments?
Well, so everything that we talk about keeps coming back to me as a mindset. So, the question of, are we to learn as children? Yes, we are. It is advantageous to us to come to each moment with a child's mind and curiosity, which is not childish. It's just like with an open mind, with the ability to grow and to learn. And that also occurred to me when we were having Margaret's discussion about her research. Do we in fact get stronger from, the things we go through in life? And so again, that too is a mindset. Do we allow ourselves to grow from the experience? Do we allow ourselves to see life as half full rather than half empty? And I think that's part of the challenge. And this whole faith in God thing, I mean, I'm just not there yet, right? But if I have the mindset that I'm open to the possibility, then maybe this can happen for me too. So, when I look at my two parents, my dad was somebody who never could find the good, never could find the joy. And, while disease killed him, I think that killed him as well. Whereas my mother, who has been through more struggles in her life, and thank God, I don't believe in God, but I'm going to thank him anyway, just in case, right? Cover all my bases. Is somebody who weathers the storm in a more positive way. It's not that she's not affected. It's not that she doesn't suffer or cry or be angry or whatever, but she's more resilient. So, I guess what I'm saying is, so much of this that we're talking about is the mindset. Can I see this as a learning experience? Can I allow myself the possibility of seeing the good in the world? And maybe ultimately assigning that good to God or faith or whatever. So that's where I am.
Very Buddhist.
My initial thought to it was it's complicated.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's Margaret can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of cases where people go through very similar experiences but come out with very different mindsets based on those experiences, and it's not entirely clear why. As I say, my abnormal psych, the one thing I learned in abnormal psych in college was, is it environmental? Is it genetic? Yes. It's both. And nobody's entirely certain why you can have, even two people can experience the exact same event and have completely different responses to it. But yes, there is part of it is a mindset, and part of it is about growth, and part of it is, can I learn from this? Can I grow from it? But I think some of it is also, am I alone in this?
That's the God part.
That's where I go with the God part, is that, when you're going through something difficult, it can feel very lonely because nobody can really understand how you're reacting and how you feel about it. It's one of the things that, if you want any advice in doing pastoral counseling in any way, shape, or form, number one thing you never say is, I understand how you feel. Because you never understand how somebody feels, because even if you went through a very similar thing, you don't know how they're feeling about it. But it feels very lonely. And what faith, belief, and God does is let you know you're not alone in this. If nothing else, God is with you at that moment, in those moments where you are struggling. At the very least, you're not alone.
That's tough. I mean, for me, that's yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Rabbi, I think you used an important term before when you said Judaism teaches and continued. And I think that the point is, I didn't listen in that lesson. I'm not there yet.
Well, you're not there in which part? That God cared about us?
Judaism or there, that that the faith that there is some indefinable thing, spirit, whatever, that is there for me all the time. And for simplicity, you can say God. But if I don't have faith that there is a God, if I would say, if somebody, random person on the street, asked me, do you believe in God? I'd say no. I wouldn't be the person who would say, see the beautiful trees, see the lovely scenery, see this. And Sacks talks about that a little bit when he talks about some people only see God in the good things around them. But the Sacks is saying, I want you to see or to understand that God can be evident in the struggles also.
So, I know Margit's waiting and it's getting late also, so I don't want to go too far, but I think one of the questions to consider is, describe the God that you don't believe in.
Blank screen.
So, that's a worthwhile question to consider. See, for those of you who are saying, I don't really believe in God. Well, when you say you don't believe in God, what do you not believe in? That could probably be an entire class, but Margit, what were you going to say?
Well, now I have three brief things to say. One is, you talked about genetics, and actually in the research I did, I had genetically different animals. I mean, they were, and they did respond differently. Although the outcome was essentially the same, the response was very different among the three genetically different groups. But that's number one. Secondly, I wanted to point out that in terms of, secondly, I usually ask people when they say they don't believe in God, what metaphor for God are you not believing in? And it's sort of the same question. But thirdly, I just wanted to point out that in terms of the Parsha, what we're doing now is God wrestling.
My intro to Judaism class,
God,
the unit the unit on God is actually the title is God wrestling. Because that's what Jacob does, is that Jacob has to wrestle with God, and that's why we're named Yisrael, because we are the ones who wrestle with God, and what does that mean, and what does that mean for our lives?
I guess a lot of us are still Jacobs, but
Well, God willing, we always will be. But
this is all wrestling.
any final comments, thoughts, questions? If we want to tackle this question of what God we don't believe in next time, we can do that. But I haven't read the next week's parsha yet. But
Well, I don't think anybody in this group will be guilty of saying God wants us to do X, Y, or Z. Because that always gets me.
What, did you hear Saban's interview on Sunday afternoon? When he said he got up the next morning and went to church, and basically he said, you know, God had two options and he chose us to win. And I'm like, I mean, those weren't the exact words, but that was the kind of what he was saying. And I said, well, you know, I guess he chose my team to lose, which I don't believe. So I think your thinking's all off.
yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. To Suzanne's point, I do think God wants us to do things. I think there are pretty explicit lists of what God wants us to do. And we still have to choose whether or not we're going to do that.
I don't mean the Torah says that kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, more
People.
like they got it directly from God.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
I'm a believer.
Saw her face. Now I'm a believer. Sorry, great song.
I could go either way.
I do think that life is much easier when you are a believer. I believe that God really does want us to struggle. I mean, for all that we were supposed to accomplish that long list of 613 mitzvot, it is a struggle to even begin to be aware of all that we're supposed to be doing, much less to accomplish it. So I don't believe that we're supposed to wake up each morning and say, well, I love God and he loves me, and now I'm done, and you know, I can go out and play mahjong all day. I don't think that's what it's about. So that's, I think I feel especially lucky because I am a believer, and I've tried to figure out when or how I became a believer, and that's another discussion. But I feel very lucky that I do have a faith.
One of the happiest people I've ever known is an aunt of mine. She recently died at the age almost 100 years old. She's a good Christian woman, and she, I mean, terrible things happened in her life. Really, you know, her things happened to her children. Things happened to both of her husbands. Just awful things happened in her life, and yet she had a very firm belief in God, and despite all of those things that happened, she ended up she not only ended up, throughout her life, she was, in a sense, one of the most deeply happy people that I've ever known, and that would be nice.
So you know, this is making me think there's some other books we should read next year, but next year is next year. So for today, we're gonna call it a class. Wishing everybody a good week. Kol hakavod to everybody again. Thank you for sharing, and we'll go on to a Parshat Vayeshev next week and learn from there. So Be well, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you.